So I'll start out a little meta here. It's so funny to me when I give these talks. Much of the time, or most of the time, I sit and I have literally no idea at all what I'm going to talk about. Even as I'm speaking now, who knows where it'll go. But there's something um, to convey about that, and that is really there's just a very deep and profound trust in um, the unfolding of this moment, for lack of a better word, that whatever is here is all that's needed. And that's really all I ever reference, ever, when I'm pointing in this way, talking about this topic. Um, and this is also, in a sense, why I know it is not only available for everyone, but it's already in their experience. Occasionally, I'll have someone ask me something like, on my YouTube channel, something like, do you think it's possible that there's someone that just can't wake up? Like it's just impossible for a certain person or something. And not, when I talk about this stuff, when I'm talking in this way, I'm never talking philosophically, even if it sounds like I am, because I just don't have a philosophical interest in spirituality. That's not interesting. What's interesting is the possibility of an individual addressing the fundamental question, addressing their own suffering and wanting to wake up. That's what's interesting, and that's what I engage always, essentially, in this environment. So when someone asks a question like that, sometimes it comes from different places, but ultimately what I feel is just a lot of doubt. And what I feel is really what I want to do is support that person, um, more than anything, because what I feel is that they're sort of holding on to their ideas about whatever they think spirituality and awakening is, in a sense, using that to as a sort of a rock in the river or something, because they can feel the pull, and yet to hold on to the rock that says, well, maybe I just can't wake up. Um, then again, you have to wonder, well, why are you on my channel? Why are you here? Why are you commenting that specifically here versus anywhere else? Why didn't you just turn off the channel and go do something else? So I try to read between the lines, and I have an assumption that at some level, if you're engaging this, you want to wake up. Or you trust that there's something deeper. Forget the term awakening. There's something deeper. There's a deeper truth that is accessible. And so if I were to engage the concern directly, is it possible that someone can't wake up? Well, in one way of speaking, the gist of what awakening is all about is that you see exquisitely clearly that there's no way that you can't wake up. It's impossible, because it's your true nature. And that certainty that comes out of that, I hesitate to use the word certainty with this, because it's not a mental certainty. It's not a cognitive certainty. It's not a provable certainty. It's beyond any of that. But the release with finally seeing that, there's different ways of saying it, but one way of saying it is that everything is profoundly okay. Everything you could ever possibly need, in fact, everything that could ever possibly exist, is simultaneously existing here. So your true nature goes beyond all concepts of you, of course. It goes beyond all narratives of you and all residues of those narratives. Even when the mind has become calm and we've woken up beyond the identification with thought, there are still residues that seem to somehow anchor that to the body. And not just the body is our, in a sense, it's our analogy for the physical world, for physicality, physical existence. And it goes beyond that. But the residue of attachment, the residue of identifying identity, goes very deep. once we are able to follow it all the way down, however that happens, and pluck up those last tethers of identity, something is revealed that is so remarkable and so striking. But again, I hesitate to say it in any way that makes it seem like a special event, or because it's nothing like that. It's the end of all boundaries. It's the end of all illusion of boundaries. And in that, everything is awakeness. Everything is Buddha nature. Everyone is Buddha nature. So from that recognition, the most sure I am about anything is that you have access to your true nature. Those words may not fully resonate with you. It may come about differently in a different individual. I don't want to impose any of my own ways of speaking or frameworks or views on anyone at all. So for some people, it is, I am God, or what is God? That's fine if that's your entry point, is that's the way things feel for you. It's perfectly fine. If it's an approach through Dharma, through insight, however that moves for you. But the underlying truth of it is that it is absolutely available to you, for sure. Many people on here don't need to be convinced of that. And that's great. It's wonderful. And I know that. But there are always a few around who doubt, and yet they are taking the courageous steps to walk into a mysterious place. This triggers a lot of fear for some people. Well, it triggers a lot of fear for all of us at some point. There's no way around that. But many of us here have gotten through a lot of the fear barriers, and or they're familiar with the energetic signature of fear and are okay with it. But yeah, when this is new to us, there can be again an exuberance, almost like a mini awakening out of just the naivete of thinking you were a person in a storyline in a life with seeking and all that, and suddenly you really taste the truth of what we're pointing to here, and it's as if the ego, the non-existent ego, just doesn't even notice it. It's quite an exuberance. But what often comes after that, at least for some people, is a massive amount of fear. It comes in different forms. It can be anger. It can be complete rejection of all of this nonsense. Anger toward me, I've felt that many times. As gentle as I try to be with this message, it just happens, massive amounts of doubt, complete distraction from this endeavor altogether. And so this isn't everyone, but there are some for whom that degree of fear surprises them. They're not used to it. And of course, in the grand scheme of things, this is okay. But I like to just point out that that's part of how this goes. In the book I wrote a small section about when the other shoe drops. And that means that when we get a taste of unfiltered reality, let's call it whatever, a truth beyond the normal dimensions of what we consider our usual life, however that happens, it's often followed by a sort of disorientation, disillusionment that we may or may not even relate to the initial experience. For me, this definitely happened early on in life, a few different times. And it really took me a long time to even realize that's what it was, that there were openings, and then they were followed by a sort of massive emotional repression coming to the surface, coming into consciousness. And it didn't feel good. It didn't feel like, oh, great, this is what I can metabolize and integrate so that I can be more clear. It was just like, what in the hell is this? And my miserable life felt suddenly more miserable. So that happens. And anyone who's listening and can relate, just understand that it's okay. It's okay. These intense emotional blocks that suddenly release and come into consciousness, fear, anger, doubt, along those lines, don't stay forever. And the fact that they were able to release means that you have the capacity. Perhaps you have a slightly expanded capacity from previous to a recent insight, and that's why this is coming to the surface, and it's okay. The number 1, 2, and 3 thing to do about it is to accept the fact that it really is okay. It is how this goes. It's a part of this process that probably is under talked about by almost everyone. Not everyone, but and then notably in some areas of spirituality, some parts of spirituality, some groups and so forth, it's completely overlooked, if not just completely avoided, the topic of shadow work, of this emotional pain that we're going to go through. And it can be quite intense. So I suppose at some point in any retreat, I like to just touch on this so that anyone who's not completely familiar with it yet knows that it does happen. It, like all experiences, it comes and goes. You have the capacity for it. And that's most of what will really help you get through it. There are many good approaches, many good strategies to work with emotion, inquiry methods. But when it's new to you, it's overwhelming, it's just really heavy, surprising, and so forth. I recommend just giving yourself the space to experience it. Put yourself in an environment that feels safe for you, whether it's in a quiet place in your home, whether it's in nature with your pets, whatever it is. And letting yourself feel as much as you can, as close as you can to the physical sensation of it in the body. Even with this, be gentle. Don't try to force your attention to remain in a body center, if that's where it is. Often when we first come in contact with certain emotions, we'll feel a sort of bouncing of attention. It's like it doesn't want to be in the body and it doesn't want to be in the mind. It's as if it's saying no to everything, right? No to the sensation in the body and no to all of the thoughts and interpretations of what this could mean to me, this emotion, right? So it's as if there's something that doesn't have anywhere to abide. There's something like almost feels like a caged animal. And so with that understanding, just know that even when we commit to sitting in a quieter environment, giving ourselves some time to just metabolize this, allowing our attention to just rest naturally, gently in the physical sensations, whether it's in the chest, gut, neck, tends to be in those areas. Just know that even that can be challenging. It tends to feel restless, like it wants to escape, wants to go somewhere, get out. But again, just gently allowing our attention to kind of slide back down or drift back down into the sensations in the body. And again, knowing that this momentary contact, even if it's just a moment that you can remain in that space, that's courageous work. That's okay. That's enough. You don't have to force anything to happen. It's not a contest for how long we can endure something. It's more just a vulnerable willingness to touch in. Again, tends to be somewhere in the midline, chest, neck, throat, gut. Sometimes when there has been a lot of thought, a lot of mind energy that's being disidentified from, it tends to be in the head. You might feel pressure in the head. Anyone who's been at this a while knows that the experience of the pressure in the head, behind the eyes, the density, tension just keeps getting sucked into it. That's a little more of a heady experience, but it's similar in nature. So just giving yourself some time and be patient, and know that unlike thoughts tend to come and go and morph quickly and change. And as I discussed yesterday, we can teach ourselves actually to orient toward the thought substance, the substance of consciousness, keeping our attention in that space, in that thought space. With some practice, you can actually get pretty good at just calming the mind incrementally by orienting toward whatever the next thought form is. And you notice a lot of fluctuation and fluidity in the mind space. This body space that we're talking about, the emotional centers, they tend to have a different quality. They feel more dense. They're slower to change. Often there's more restlessness underneath them. You may or may not recognize that, but energetic restlessness tends to sort of hide underneath a little bit more. If it had a voice, it would be saying, no, 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 gotta go, get me out of here. So recognizing that there's just a different quality to this space, this emotional space, which may or may not be clearly delineated as a particular emotion. You may very well know this is grief, and it's about my father's passing, or maybe something very specific, very obvious, but it may not. It may just be, this is that heaviness that's been in my chest since I remember being a human. I don't know what it is, but it's there. Feels a little bit like sadness, feels a little bit like frustration, but it's heavy. And I don't know what to do with it. Feels like I wish I knew what to do with it. Might also feel like I wish it wasn't there. So it can be ill-descript, and it can be very specific. It can be anger over a specific event in life. And sometimes it's very clearly one emotion: anger, sadness, fear, but you have no idea at all what it's about. You don't know. You can't relate it to a specific event in your life. All of these, I've been personally through multiple times, and they're all okay. None is better or worse. None is right or wrong. However this plays out is okay. Trust it. The thing that's interesting about emotion is these emotion centers is that feeling is enough. It really is. Just the feeling of it is enough. But when there's still identity in the mind and the thoughts and beliefs, it doesn't feel like it's enough. It feels like we need to know what to do with it, what to do about it, how to heal it. But as realization deepens, we often find this very interesting and paradoxical thing about these emotions. And we also tend to start feeling them in a more pure and direct way, is that when you feel sadness, you become sadness. There's no question of, is there a way out of it? Is there something to heal? Is there something to fix? It's as if the whole environment is sadness. And in that, there can just be a little bit of resistance left. And that little bit of resistance feels really heavy until it drops. And then it's as if, again, the whole environment is sadness, and it feels deeply and profoundly okay. And it's like this with all emotions. So with emotion, it is fascinating that it's simply about full vulnerability. with the emotion itself, with the experience itself, even without the labels. Adyashanti has a really nice story he told in one of his books about his dog that he grew up with, or he had for a lot of his early adulthood, I think. Anyway, he said this dog was his constant companion, and it died. The dog passed away. And he mentioned being at the funeral and crying and crying and crying and crying until he let go so much that he felt this smile coming up in the midst of the sadness, as it was just letting go, letting go, letting go. That's exactly how this is that I'm describing. So all of these ways this unfolds, all of these ways this plays out with emotion are okay, natural. I would say that's generally the foundation of the approach. It's about embodiment. But as I mentioned earlier, for a while, as we learn to kind of navigate this shadow space or this emotion work, for a while there really does feel like there's a sort of split between the body and mind, and there isn't, and there's not a body and then there's not a mind and all that, but experientially it feels this way, and what it feels again like is it's like attention doesn't want to reside anywhere specific in this experience. It just wants out. So it doesn't want to feel the sensation. It doesn't want to feel the narratives around this emotion, this experience. So it kind of bounces back and forth. It's kind of uncomfortable in the head. It's uncomfortable in the body. It can feel like this at times. So when you notice this, when you notice that, okay, I do recognize that this is what Angela was pointing to, is there's something heavy here, something dense, something clearly emotional. And I can see how there's that restlessness where it is a bit hard to keep attention in the body space of it. There's something that's just saying no to it. And at the same time, up in the mind, it's tumultuous. There's you feel like you're being pulled this way and that way about the narratives surrounding what you're feeling, and so forth. What I recommend in this case, one approach you can take is you sort of spend a little time doing each. So you spend some time in this physical space that I've been describing, just acceptance, just feeling, no narratives, no labels, just whatever's here. Direct sensation. Contact is enough. And then spend some time in the mind space, a bit of inquiry. What is the theme of this experience? What is the theme of this? It may just be a word like an emotion, like frustration. Okay, then you can unpack that a bit. What are my ideas surrounding this? What are my concerns? Well, it might be, if this sensation stays, because it's distracting me, it's pulling my attention there. If it stays too long, I may not be able to handle it. This is a common concern we have. Or it may prevent me from doing the other things I want to do tomorrow or the next day or in my life. Or we may find judgments around it. I don't want to be a, depressed person, or I don't want to go back to the place I was before in my life, or whatever these concerns and worries and judgments are. And just accept those, just unpack those beliefs and let them be there. See if you can find the yes that says it's okay to hold this belief, this thought in the mind for this moment. Can I hold this one judgment as a thought, because it's only a thought in this moment? Can I hold it in the conscious space without trying to do anything with it? Can I find the place where there's no polarity around it, where I'm not pushing and pulling on it? Can I find that sort of neutrality in the conscious space with one judgment, one belief? Give yourself a few moments to do that, even a round of meditation. Find the heavy beliefs. There's going to be usually something around the narrative that's a heavy belief, a fear or something, but it's narrative. You can spell it out in your mind, and then just give it your attention, give it your full attention. Tell it you can be here. You can have all of my attention right now. You have all of the space you need to be here now, what you are. Whatever that is, whatever belief it is, concern, fear. The mind space, as we have been exploring, is really vast and flexible when we don't add a lot of avoidance in there, and we don't push and pull on thoughts. We actually allow the thoughts to be just as they are. And we touch into the substance of thought, which is consciousness. This space can relax very quickly. So do we just spend some time doing this? And usually at some point, it almost like points an arrow down to the body again, or we feel attention just come back into the body, and we may feel a bit of a density there again, just as before. And that's fine. We remember we don't apply the rules of mind to this space. We just feel it. There's nothing to figure out about it, nothing to solve. We don't need it to end. We don't need to label it. Just feel, inhabit. I think it really can be this simple with emotion and shadow work. If just you're really willing to see everything that's there, feel everything that's there, and be willing to find a neutral stance with it, with the thought especially. Giving everything its moment in consciousness, giving everything its moment where it has your full attention. The best gift you can give anything in the universe is your attention. And what I think we're really doing with this is a very simple thing. We're slowing down enough to feel all of the components, experience all the components of what's moving through, instead of what we tend to do through conditioning, through social conditioning and so forth. What we tend to do is not give it enough time and get very distracted with many other things, not realizing that those distractions and even projects and even valuable projects, we kind of forget that we initially used that to avoid this right here. We just totally forget that. We overlook it in this busy world. It's busy. We have a society full of distraction, and that's fine. But don't let the distractions use you. Be willing to come back here. And that's what we do in retreat. That's why we do retreat, really, to remind ourselves of this. All we're doing is slowing down. We're reversing the tendencies of conditioning to look outward, the next thing, the next thing I want, the next thing I'm going to get, the next phase of my life. There's time and place for all of those things, but it kind of becomes a monster when we identify fully with it. That's why this process is about disidentification. As we disidentify from that, then it doesn't use us anymore. We can still plan. We can still make decisions. But we're not relegating our attention to a prison of constant seeking. It's free to do this other work, which is initially uncomfortable, but it's mostly initially uncomfortable because we've been avoiding it. And we never chose to do this. You're not a guilty party. There's no guilty party. If it wasn't so painful, it would be comical the fact that none of us purposely avoid anything, yet almost everyone avoids almost everything in the emotion spectrum. It's a very strange, it's a thing about conditioning and human consciousness and self-consciousness. So, but yeah, it's not like you did anything wrong and now you have to go back and undo the wrongs or anything. It's just a matter of a simple act of feeling, a simple act of asking, inquiring, what is the narrative here? What's the storyline around this experience, this sensation? And sometimes it's, as I mentioned before, it's not always obvious, especially when this, I guess I'm just speaking from my own experience, but often if we sit in a retreat setting and we have access to a sort of samadhi consciousness sort of thing, the mind gets very calm, and yet that dense experience is there, right? You might feel this energetic density in the body. This is a very common experience because it's a very common question. So it really doesn't seem to have a narrative. It's like, I don't even know what this is. I've said before, like in my experience, it appeared almost like a frozen ball of soup. There's like components to it, but you don't even know what they are, and you don't know how to get in there. And the more you sit and meditate, the mind does get quieter, but that density is still kind of just sitting there. So in those cases, that's what the inquiry is for. And sometimes it's just, what am I feeling? And just let that one question just sit with it, ask it a few times and sit with it over the day, even if you really feel stuck and you really don't know, what emotion am I feeling? Or what am I not wanting to feel? What am I avoiding is another one. Another good question. It can kind of lead you into something that starts to tell you, okay, well, yeah, that's what the narrative is about this. What am I not accepting is another good one. And often it's a very simple thing, but just recognizing, oh, okay, I see. I'm not accepting the fact that this retreat isn't feeling as expansive and peaceful as I hoped it would. Could be anything. Often that's just enough. And you can kind of hold that in consciousness, that perception, that judgment or belief in the ways we've been talking about. And it softens. And often when it softens, give it some time. We return to the body and we find something slightly different. Might feel a little looser, more expanded. Might be in a different place. Sometimes it's gone, just gone. May come back, but so to the degree you can muster natural curiosity about all of this. Trust in the process, a natural curiosity about what's actually going on in here, believing that you can actually receive an answer, and patience. Sometimes you really do have to just wait it out and ask, what is this I'm feeling? It will come. And I think it's important to keep in mind that even in deep stage realization, working through very subtle perceptual filters, non-duality specifically, always be open to the possibility that you need to return to this for some time. You may not want to, but it just happens this way. This is a non-linear process, and big chunks of emotional emotionally repressed material can come to the surface when you didn't think they were going to, or didn't expect it, or hadn't had that happen in quite some time. So always being open to that possibility, because sometimes we don't even realize we're keeping that in the background. We're trying to work with formlessness, and it's just evading us. Well, formlessness is already the case. We can't make it be that way. It is that way. So if there's something obscuring it, it's usually an inside job. So be willing always to return to shadow work. I think generally speaking, people who have moved through deeper stages of realization know this, because you can't really sidestep it. You can to a degree and for a while, but it gets harder and harder and harder to really sidestep this. It'll knock on the door louder and louder and louder until you finally just open it. Yeah. Okay. I think that's a good enough amount of material for today. We have a Q&A at 3:50 p.m. or 15:50. We have a meditation at 1500 as well. So again, I'll close this Zoom meeting and then reopen it so that it allows me to get the video rendered. The one from this morning, I put some pretty flowers on it and I put it on YouTube, the guided meditation, just sound. So that's up. And enjoy your time. We'll see you at 3 p.m.